Hey everyone, this is going to be the third video, really the second one that I'm going to be really talking about the content. I'm going to go over chapter 3 of the book, Shifting the Torah Paradigm, and I got a hard copy in yesterday and it looks really nice. These are case bound. If you ask me, they're a little more expensive than I would have liked. I think they're right at a little over $42 a piece. I didn't make that decision. I tried everything I could to bring that down to $34.99, and they would not have it. So the last book, in Crushing Conceptualism, they let me pick the price. So I thought for a 580-page book, I thought $24.99 would be good for that. They let me do that, and then I think 30 some for the hardback. This one I was going to set at $19.99 and for the soft cover, and they would not let me do that. They would not pick the price. Something has changed with the publisher in the past 4 years, and so for whatever reason, sorry guys, but from what the feedback that I'm getting, the reviews that are on Amazon is getting great reviews. It is well worth the $24.99 for the soft cover. And I don't know if you want to spend the extra money for the hardback, then to each his own. So today, like I said, I wanted to talk about chapter 3. And this is all about Genesis chapter 1. And I spend a whole chapter talking about this passage of scripture because there are a lot of people who, I've seen this more and more, who like to bring Mosaic law into Genesis chapter 1 as a filter, and they run Genesis chapter 1 through the laws of Moses and sacrificial law to interpret it. Even though there's nothing mentioned in the creation account about killing animals, about eating the flesh of animals, that's what people are doing. And if you ask me, it's probably the most severe case of eisegesis that I have seen in a long time. So we're going to look at that. And I guess the first thing I really wanted to do is to connect the humanity and the animal kingdom together. We're going to look at some things that connects us with the animals, similarities. And so one of the first things is Genesis chapter 1, verse 30. It says, to every beast of the earth and to every bird of the heavens and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life. And I'm going to stop there. A lot of you thought I was going to get into what they were eating, but I'm going to stop there just so you can see that they have the breath of life. And then let's jump to the next chapter. It says in Genesis 2, verse 7, the Lord God formed man of the dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living creature. So right there, I mean, that's really one of the big things, is that humans and animals were given the breath of life. And right here it says that is how man became a living creature. And, you know, I've always heard how there's reasons why humans are intellectually superior to the animals. And, you know, I agree, but a lot of people think the reason is because animals don't have souls or spirits. But one of my arguments is that I do believe they have souls, and the Bible is clear about this. First of all, if a man became a living, breathing soul because of the breath of life, when that was breathed into him, it would accomplish the same in animals when God would breathe his breath into them too. They became a living soul. We all possess a sense of awareness, and this is called sentience. And humans and animals are sentient beings. We have the ability to make conscious decisions because we're given a quality of life that only comes from the breath of God. And I'm going to show you a few passages that are really interesting. Let me remember how to share my screen. Here we go. It says in Ecclesiastes, I said in my heart with regard to the children of man that God is testing them, that they may see that they themselves are but beasts. So here it's comparing humans to animals. For what happens to the children of man and what happens to the beasts is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath, and man has no advantage over the beasts, for all is vanity. And Psalms, I think this is really neat that it says in chapter 150, verse 6, let everything that has breath praise the Lord. So I think that's really neat because you're going to see in the beginning, everything was given breath and had the ability to communicate, could praise the Lord. We all spoke the same language. Man and animals communicated with one another. And I think you're going to see that we're just really disconnected today from the animal kingdom like we were in creation. That's why people don't give any mind to eating animals. They're disconnected. But yeah, humans, animals, we share many unique similarities, unlike plants. Okay, aside from the breath of life, one of the most obvious phenomenons is that we possess self-awareness or free will in the sense of personal identity. And if you own an animal, if you have a pet dog, you know that it knows its name, like they have identity. Okay. Plants, they are not self-conscious beings like humans or animals. Animals have souls because they're free-thinking creatures that possess a thought process, and they just share the same tenets of design as humans. They have minds. They can think. And it's interesting. I put a little footnote here in Psalm 74 that the psalmist identified turtle doves as having souls because he mentions the soul of the turtle dove, and that is it's the word soul there is appropriate. It's a Hebrew word nephesh, which describes the soul, the mind, or the identity of a created being. But here's the thing, it only describes forms of creation with sentience and perception or free will. And there are a few variations of the word, but it's interesting that nephesh is only used to describe humans and animals. And plants, sure, they're living organisms. And people will always use this argument. They'll say, well, plants are alive and you kill plants to eat. Yeah, but plants are never described as having nephesh or a soul. So that's another thing. Let's see. In Job 12, it uses the word, Job 12, verses 7 through 10. I think it's verse 10. What it looks like is that every living thing, it describes the soul or the nephesh of every living thing and the breath of mankind also. Okay. But, I understand that we were created. There is a distinction between humans and animals, and it's the God image. We were created in God's image. So I don't dismiss that in the book. I definitely point that out. and even talk about how Messiah is the only human who actually succeeded in displaying that image throughout his life. And it even talks about he is the image of the invisible God. So we could go down that road of discussing Christology and Godhead theology, but for the sake of this discussion, we'll just say that he is the only man who was able to live according to design throughout his life. And in later chapters, you're going to see that he was a vegetarian. He did not handle or eat meat as some think the Gospels depict. And so we'll get to that. Okay, let's talk about the blood life, because you can't have the breath of life without having blood life. I can't speak of one without the other. Everything that possesses the breath of life also possesses blood. So if you have a respiratory system, then you also have a circulatory system. They go hand in hand. And when the Bible speaks of death, it often mentions one or the other. Like, for instance, when they breathe their last breath, they return to the ground. Can't remember where that's found. Let's see, 7, that's in Psalms. The spirit. Breath is often associated with the spirit of man, and Jesus cried out, and again with a loud voice, he yielded up his spirit, or some translations talk about the ghost. When someone gives up the ghost, they're giving up their spirit or their breath. Okay, and blood is no different. It's commonly mentioned anytime someone dies. And you guys know this one. The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. And that's Cain, God speaking to Cain there. And in another passage it says, you are guilty of spilling blood. So again, it's often associated with death. Breath and blood reveal a common thread between mankind and the animal kingdom. Okay? And it's relevant because the remainder of my whole book contends against the notion that Yahweh, that he required the spilling of blood throughout the history of mankind, which he didn't. He never required blood, and you will see that. But it's crazy because, you know, we we grow up and we learn about the Bible and we get this distorted image, and people have retained this idea, especially in Hebrew roots, that God went through the trouble of designing animals with the same attributes as humans, including consciousness, free will, personal identity, blood life, the breath of life, even vulnerability to suffering. And that he created animals with all these characteristics only for humans to dispose of them either at our discretion or upon his demand. So if I were to state it bluntly, basically God supposedly designed animals just so they could suffer and die for his pleasure and ours. So, but people don't want to say it that way. They don't want to think that this image is really as morbid as it seems. Like, we can't state it bluntly. And people will say, well, his ways are not our ways. Or we have to trust the text. And really, it's a distorted perception of what the text actually says. They don't want to stop and slow down and take a minute and just use their logical thought process to say, is this really the God that created us? Is this our creator who demanded us, who demanded blood, who required us to kill his creation? They don't want to question that because of their ideas of what they've been raised to believe, and this idea of God that they have formed since they were a child. And I hate that it's just so widespread among Christianity and Torah that this is the God, that he required these occult practices of the nations. But the fact is that really we're just missing something, okay? And that's part of my ministry. I feel like I just need to bring this out and show people, just like a lot of people who think they really, their ministry is to also correct a lot of the bad teachings that are in Christianity and Torah. everyone else, has a ministry that corrects people about where we're misunderstood. But the minute you talk about veganism or let's not kill the animals anymore, God doesn't want us to kill the animals. It's like for some reason people lose their minds and they think, oh, you've rejected Yahweh's commands. You're rejecting Torah. It's not like that. It's just another case of, hey, look, slow down. We've missed something. It's like, I'm not trying to tell you you're wrong. I had to admit that I was wrong. And that's what people think. They think I just want to be contentious and show other people that they're wrong and that I'm right. And it's not about that. Because look, seriously, I had to admit that I was wrong. Just a couple years ago, I was fighting for clean eating and saying how, look, you guys need to quit eating pork and stick to beef, stuff like that, But someone challenged me one day. They really did. They're like, you really need to look into how kosher all of these meats that you eat are. They might be deemed clean by Mosaic law because of what the meat is. But if you really look at how people are getting their meat, then they're not in compliance with Torah. And when I did that, oh gosh, it just opened up the door to a lot of the information in this book. So, all right, imagine this for just a moment. Just imagine this. If you're a pet lover, you're going to hate me for this, but just imagine a scenario for a moment. Okay? Imagine that you and a group of friends visit your local pet store and you decide to purchase your favorite dog. Like you're together. You're in love with this dog and you think, wow, let's get this. I don't know if it's imagine a Saint Bernard or just a big fluffy dog, a fuzzy dog. And now suppose you guys take it home and you begin to soothe it. You lay your hands on it and you pet it, you're rubbing its head until you earn its confidence. Okay, you're warming it up. And when you do this, the dog doesn't realize that you're about to betray its trust. And when he least suspects it, your friends suddenly pull out a knife and they slit the dog's throat. And all you can do is watch until every drop of blood just spills to the ground. Okay? And now visualize this. Visualize your friend stirring his finger around in all the blood and then smearing it all over different objects in the room. And then after that, he begins to spatter it all over you and all over your friends. And from there, what your friends do is they collectively, they dismember this dog and they rip out its organs and they place its head, its organs, its bones. They place everything in a heap and they burn the rest of its body. And what's left is this choice cut of meat that you and your friends can feast on until you're satisfied. And I know a lot of you are probably getting very impatient with me by hearing me, but it's just a morbid picture. It has nothing to do with the God of the Bible, does it? Actually, it does, except instead of a dog, we're talking about a bull, a ram, and 2 lambs. Everything that I just told you is what God supposedly, or what people believe, God required this when he ordained priests. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to shift your paradigm and show you throughout this book, throughout this series, that that was not God demanding them to do that. That was the way they chose to orchestrate that ceremony. Okay? Because if you think about it, does it make any sense to think the creator of those beings would require that just to ordain a priest? I mean, using your logic, I'm not talking about, hey, let's not think, let's just let the Bible be our authority because we've been told that God requires it. I'm not talking about what you've been indoctrinated to think. I'm not talking about what you believe the Bible teaches. I'm talking about using your logic for just a minute. And people are afraid to do this. They don't want to. Instead, they'll be like, you can't let your personal feelings interpret the Bible. I mean, people are afraid to use their logical thinking. I remember talking about this one time with someone, and I said, seriously, are you at peace with doing this, with slaughtering a lamb, an innocent lamb? And someone said, well, it's easy once you just open the Bible and remind yourself that God requires it. And they have to do that every time. It's like, it is morbid. It does mess with you. And people don't want to talk about how people go crazy who work in slaughterhouses and these factories. It's like one of the worst cases. You think it's something to go postal. You remember when people used to talk about that and all the postal workers? But it's so much more. It's a lot more extreme in these butcher plants. People go nuts. Anyway, let's get back to this. Really, on one hand, we consider this behavior morbid. If you're talking about the warm fuzzy, the dogs, it's when you're talking about pets, then the idea of killing animals is just inhumane. But when you're talking about the animals that you like to eat, it's perfectly normal. So I put a quote here. It's funny that I came across this quote because I used to listen to this guy when I was a teenager. Moby, he's a music artist. Very unique style of music. He says, the dog you love is emotionally the same as the cow you ate. It's simple. It's a simple statement, but I mean, it packs a lot of powerful truth. I had no idea he was even a vegan. Okay, basically, the hurdle that most people face is that if the Bible says it, then it settles the matter. People don't want to know why the God of the Bible is depicted as a bloodthirsty savage. And they don't care. The only thing they know is that God apparently commanded his people to perform these blood rituals, and they accept it as divine covenant behavior. And no questions asked. And a lot of the reason is because first of all, they don't walk through the story in chronological order. They have these assumptions about what the Levitical system and the sacrificial system, the purpose for it, and then they bring that. So already they're confused about the purpose for the sacrificial system. And two, they bring that into creation, and they interpret the creation based on what happened thousands of years later when all these pagans were brought out of Egypt. And that's a big thing. These Israelites, they had to be introduced to Yahweh. They were so far gone. They were living in Egypt. They had retained all of their pagan practices. They knew their gods. They didn't know Yahweh. They had to be pulled out of that situation, and they were in love with the sacrifices to gods. And the golden calf incident is enough proof. Like, that happened in year one, not long after they were pulled out of Egypt. It's like, look, can you guys just can you stop sacrificing to the gods for once, just so Yahweh can establish something? And so that's why he established this system to centralize it, eliminate all this excessive killing, and that it should be overseen by a priest. You had to have that official to do it. We'll get to that in the next section, the next chapter. But if it disturbs your conscience to picture that with the dog, then it should disturb you to picture it with any animal. Okay. Blood is spilled, breath, it's cut off, and the life of an innocent creature has been forfeited. Okay. We're doing pretty good. I don't know that I'm going to get through all of this, but this next section is called Distorting Dominion. And this is the passage where people are, this one along with Genesis, or the next couple of verses, I believe people have a severe case of eisegesis. I'm seeing a lot of ministries do this. I'm not trying to pick out or point to one ministry who's doing this. I've seen multiple people interpret these verses this way. Ministries that I support have this interpretation of these verses, and I do support these ministries. So a lot of people think, oh, you're just attacking them. Not really. We disagree on this, and I'm fine to disagree. I just don't know that other people feel the same way. People are not fine to disagree. Like, they want to debate this and attack this. They want to publicly shame other people for believing what I'm teaching. And Genesis 1, verse 27 and 28 uses the word, I'll do this as quick as I can. It uses the word dominion. God said, subdue it, replenish the earth, subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, the fowl of the air, and every living thing that moves on earth. Okay, so here's what's going on is that a lot of people believe this word dominion is a term of violence, and they believe that the Hebrew validates animal sacrifice. It is in favor of animal sacrifice and killing. And the way I see it, and what I talk about, sorry, I'm skipping over a lot. Humanity, a lot of people think, well, you're missing the priesthood. Priesthood is big. I agree that priesthood is big with humanity. But again, I think this supports Genesis chapter 1 even further, because the role of a priest in the garden was to be a good steward over creation. It's all about stewardship and how we care for the animals. God put us in a garden, gave us the fruit of the land, and he put us over the animals, and we were expected to be good stewards over creation. But over the years, we basically compromised our status of superiority. And if you look at this passage again from Ecclesiastes, let's look at this one more time. Whoops, I blew that up way too big. That'll be good for you guys. I said in my heart concerning the estate of the sons of men, that God might manifest them, and that they might see that they themselves are beasts. Yes, we are. We are savages for what we do. For that which befalleth the sons of men befalleth beasts. Even one thing befalleth them, as the one dieth, so dieth the other. Yea, they have all one breath, so that man has no preeminence above the beasts, for all is vanity. And I just thought that was neat to see how we got to that point. What happened? I mean, where's the dominion over the animals? The instructions given to Adam were much simpler than the extensive list that we see in the Torah given to Moses. Okay. But the original Torah, it enabled mankind to live in the divine state, the same manner as our Creator. It was the same image that Christ lived throughout his entire life. That's what was meant for humanity, for us to remain in our divine state, okay? And it included dominion status, but it complicated things when they disobeyed, okay? And when you look forward to the time of the law, when it was given to Moses, the behaviors of mankind had progressed, and they could no longer be governed in the same by the same instructions that were given in the garden. We devolved over time. So there were a lot of different behavioral changes. So Yahweh changed the way that he dealt with mankind. It wasn't because he changed. It was because we changed. And I know people like to use that argument. Well, God doesn't change. So he had to have the same set of laws in the garden as he had when he gave to Moses. Well, no, he didn't. Mankind changed. So later when the Israelites were coming out, they were in a different circumstance. They were coming out of Egypt, pagans. God had to have a laundry list of laws for them to abide by, because they were way past this wicked state that Adam and Eve were. So, all right, let's move on. But yeah, like I said, it was in the garden. It was when the animals were created. It was just a different world, and a lot of people know this. That in Jubilees, look at this verse. Look at this. And on that day was closed the mouth of all beasts and cattle and the birds, whatever walks and moves, so that they could no longer speak, for they had all spoken with one another with one lip and one tongue. This is after the fall. So, and here I have a little thing about what language that was. It says it was Hebrew, so I think that's neat that we can pinpoint the original language to Hebrew. But imagine a world where mankind was put in a garden to be priests, good stewards over the balance of creation, and he was even commanded to name each one, to have this interaction, this personal relationship. They spoke to him, he spoke to them. They spoke in a language where everyone could understand each other perfectly fine. Does it, I mean, seriously, in that setting, in that context, does it sound like God put the animals there for Adam to kill and eat? No, like what we see is that, hey, he put them there so you could name them and have fellowship with them. And a lot of people, they understand this part of the story. A lot of people are advocates of Jubilees, but they, for some reason, believe that God intended for mankind to betray the creatures, that he wanted them to hunt them down and kill them for food. But it's totally contradictory to what we are reading. What we're reading is a story about humans being put over the creation. Adam developed relationships with the animals to the point that he named each one. There you go. See Genesis 2:19 and 20. And again, Jubilees 3:4. And Adam named them all by their respective names, and he called them, so was their name. We get a deeper look at Adam's involvement with different creatures of the earth. His dominion over the animal kingdom was more than a license to kill at his discretion. It was personal relationship and leadership. Yep. Hunting was in the back of it. It wasn't even in the back of his mind. Subdue, dominion, those words people think they're in relation to hunting and killing, but nothing in the context, or nothing in the text itself, nothing direct, and nothing in the context even alludes to this idea at all. And people who are out there saying, we need to use context to interpret the Bible. Well, nothing in Genesis chapter 1 even alludes to it. There are no hints towards killing animals. Genesis 1:20. Let's look at this just really quick. This is where we get one of the commands. Original Torah instructions right here. Commanding things to be fruitful, multiply, bring forth abundantly. Multiply. If you want to know some of the original commands, God was speaking here, bring forth abundantly and multiply. I mean, it's as simple as that. Not destroy and destruction, death and murder. There's a theme. Creation, life, abundance, being fruitful and multiplying. The context is abundantly clear. Okay, and here is where people are really eisegeting the text. It says in Genesis 1:29, 30-31, behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. And that word meat is food. I don't think anybody is going to argue that, because it does mean food. It's a generic term. And to every beast of the earth, to every fowl of the air, to every thing that creepeth upon the earth, wherein is life, I have given every green herb for meat. And it was so. And God saw that everything he made, behold, it was very good. Evening and morning were the sixth day. Now, do you see here for a minute how God is addressing mankind, saying, your food is the plants, and then how he addresses the animal kingdom. And your food is the plants. Man, God said, behold to Adam, man, your food is the plants, and to the beasts, your food is the plants. I'll show you what people do to make this fit their theology. Anti-vegan proponents, let me skip down a little bit, because there I'm talking about how a lot of people try to pinpoint Hinduism or Buddhism to the origin of veganism and stuff like this. People try to say, well, veganism is a pagan religion. It's like, that's a weak argument, because there are many religions around the earth who adopt biblical principles, and they understand it. They allow their conscience to help aid them in understanding life and reality and what our Creator intended. So you can't really, just because other religions practice the design of our Creator, doesn't mean those religions were the origin of certain concepts. That's one of the weakest arguments that I know. Okay, let's get back to it. Adam and Eve, they were created to inhabit a place called the Garden of Eden. And a garden is a place where fruit and vegetables are grown. It's a place where the green herbs and fruit-bearing trees are the primary feature, okay? The Creator encouraged them to eat freely of every tree. So if it was his intention for humans to eat animals, then it's curious why a garden was the central realm for them to occupy, and nothing about their circumstances suggests that they were expected to eat the animals. Every directive given in the creation account depicting food for Adam and Eve is a reference to the vegetation of the earth. And if we were to say that it is against to design or a sin to be plant-based, then we got to question some of the men that God chose to carry out his will. Like Daniel, he was a vegan. He was a vegetarian, at least. And the first chapter of that, I know a lot of people try to say, oh no, he just went on a fast for 3 weeks. And for a few reasons, I don't think that's true. People try to say, well, he couldn't sacrifice the temple because he was in exile. And, they try to use all these arguments to further their lust for flesh. I'll say it. I mean, the Bible calls it lust for flesh. It is. The Bible calls consuming animal flesh, it's lust for flesh. The Bible calls it soul lust. We'll get into that. Anyway, let's move on. I think people know that Genesis 1 poses a problem, and that's why they try so hard to fit Mosaic law into the narrative, even though it's a classic example of hammering a square peg in a round hole. Let's move on. I have a lot of commentary here that before I really get into the flesh corrupted its way. Oh yeah, this is good. Lawlessness increased on the earth, and all flesh corrupted its way, alike men and cattle and beasts and birds and everything that walks on the earth. All of them corrupted their ways and their orders, and they began to devour each other. And lawlessness increased on the earth, and every imagination of the thoughts of all men was evil continually. God looked on the earth, behold, it was corrupt, and all flesh had corrupted its orders. What were its orders? Up here it says that they began to devour each other. Okay, and it's calling this evil, lawlessness. So we see these words here about how, in relation to the diets of these creatures, mankind and the animals. And again, that's from the Book of Jubilees. It's practical for many insights that we don't find in the traditional canon. And I mean, for crying out loud, it talks about the animals once having the ability to speak in the original tongue. And that demonstrates the civil environment that humans and animals coexisted. But in that passage I just showed you, we're given a look at the time when both man and animals began to devour one another. It was a turning point. It means that there was a time when animals gave no thought to consuming the flesh of one another. And humans, they gave no thought to consume the flesh of animals. And here's another extra biblical source. And I know a lot of people are against this one, but look, it says, it's the Gospel of the Holy 12. We'll go over reasons why we should consider this text, and that's later. Verily I say to you, this is Yeshua talking. In the beginning, all creatures of God did find their sustenance in the herbs and the fruits of the earth alone, till the ignorance and the selfishness of man turned many of them from the use which God had given them to that which was contrary to their original use. But even these shall yet return to their natural food, as it is written in the prophets, and their words shall not fail. That's big, because we are going to look at some of the prophets where it talks about what he's saying. And he says the prophet's words won't fail. So here we talk about instinct. Well, matter of fact, here's one. Talking about Isaiah right now. The wolf. This is a pretty common verse in the biblical vegan community. The wolf shall also dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. Imagine that scenario with all these animals and children together. It sounds like what could have been in the garden. And the cow and the bear shall feed their young ones, and shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. And the suckling child shall play on the hole of the asp and the snake, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the cockatrice den. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord, and as the waters cover the sea. So I think it speaks very loudly that the Gospel of the Holy 12 and Yeshua's words, he points to this prophecy, or at least the prophecies. There are a few others that talk about this picture in the end. Okay, I'm getting way ahead of myself. Defining food. You know, I didn't really go over, I might have skipped over what I thought. Oh, no, it's in here. It's in here. This is that section. God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit of the tree. This is in Genesis 1, verses 11 through 13. He's telling the vegetation of the land, come forth, grow. God saw that it was good, and that was the third day. these different forms of creation, they had a specific purpose. And God made sure that he spent an entire day to make sure that what he created the next day would have food to eat. That's why he created the vegetation. Okay, so, and we looked at that. To you it shall be for meat. I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth. And here it is again, just so you can see it. Genesis 1:28 through 31. There it is. Very good. And so I believe this passage establishes a context and that we can understand the remainder of our story. Mankind was given dominion over the animal kingdom, which people have distorted and said, oh, that means we can kill them and eat them. No, it means you're supposed to be a good priest, a good steward over the animals. Second, the plants were given to mankind for food. And third, the plants were given to the animals for food. And if you want to understand the storyline that I'm going to talk about in this book, then you have to get those tenets right. You can't say, hey, no, we got to first filter that verse through Leviticus so that we can understand it. You can't do that. That's eisegesis. People who think their ministry revolves around correct hermeneutics and context are just falling subject to that. That's just the worst thing you can do here. Okay, anyway, and I emphasize those principles because of the growing number of people who contend that. If you read between the lines there in that passage, it alludes to animal sacrifice and eating flesh. But it's really, to be honest, it is more than reading between the lines. It's literally removing the lines. And a few people that I have talked to, I've seen a video on this, but I don't really want to say that it's because of that video. I've seen this in multiple places. People have told me, well, you just have to remove the word to from that passage. And so, I mean, we'll take a quick look at it. Here's what happens when you remove the word to from that passage. It says, I have given you every herb bearing seed, it shall be for meat, and every beast of the earth, and every fowl of the air, and everything that creepeth on the earth, wherein is life, I have given to you for meat. So that's what you can do. If you want to read flesh eating into the text, just remove the word to in each occasion in that verse, and it helps the sentence structure flow a lot more in favor of carnivorism. So just remove the twos, then you can rewrite Yahweh's terms of covenant for Adam and Eve, as well as the animal kingdom. Now, instead of understanding what the text plainly teaches, you can say that mankind was given the green light on eating the beasts, the fowl, and every creeping thing for food, despite, the word to, you have to completely remove it. But to me, it's painfully obvious that we're dealing with a severe case of eisegesis. I mean, for me, it's just obvious. And I can't understand how people who have people who promote themselves as kings of context and understanding how to interpret the Bible have fallen subject to this. It blows my mind that they ignore the context. They ignore what is stated plainly to fit this idea into the text. And here in a minute, I'm going to go over a few reasons. I mean, yeah, the Creator, he approached mankind with a direct and personal approach, and then he went to the animals. He said, Adam, your food is the plants and then animals. Your food is the plants. You know, I checked every translation in Bible Gateway. Every translation has the word "to" in all of those places. So, I mean, it's quite a charge to say that every translator got it wrong. Everyone's wrong who put the word "to" there in all those different places. They're all wrong. Take them all out. We need to read that as if God gave us the animals to kill and eat. And one translation used the word "for." I thought that was significant because if you're a wordsmith, you know the difference between giving something to someone, whereas in contrast, you could provide something for someone. And I thought that was neat because it just further supports what we're saying. The plants were given to you for food. Okay? I think this chapter 3, builds a solid case for everything I'm saying. But here's one thing that people are ignoring. It's not what's written in the text, it's what's not there. The absence of clean and unclean specifications. In the very first chapter of the Bible, where we are told what is food, we're not told anything about what's clean and unclean. And don't you find that kind of odd if this chapter was given for us to know what's food, what God designed certain things for? Furthermore, if animals were designed for food, why weren't all animals designed to be eaten? That doesn't make any sense either. What's the purpose for unclean animals if clean animals were designed to be food for humans? Why were unclean animals designed at all? I mean, what's even the point of those? Why didn't God just say, here's animals, you can eat them all? People are missing something and they don't even know how to handle this. If people can use Genesis 1, verse 29 and 30 to support their belief that animals were made to be eaten, then it's just as reasonable to say that all animals were permitted for food because there's no distinction there. You see how I can do that? I really can teach. If you can teach that Genesis 1, 29 and 30 teaches that animals were given for food, then I can just as easily use that to say that all animals were given for food because there's no distinction. Sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But it's no less ridiculous than saying the animals. I mean, after all, look at it. If you're going to remove the twos and just say that the beasts of the air, the fowl of the air, or the beasts of the earth, the fowl of the air, no distinction. So I could use that to say all beasts of the earth, all fowl. No distinction. Genesis chapter 1 was written for us to understand the design and purpose for creation. It talks about that realm where animals and humans lived together. They communicated, stewardship, priesthood. That's the picture we get. And at the end of the day, people who are imposing their pro-sacrificial views on the text of Genesis chapter 1, they have to ignore these inconsistencies. First of all, nothing in the text states that animals were created to feed humans. There are no direct statements. 2, nothing in the context alludes to the idea that animals were created to be killed and eaten. There are no allusions, no hints, no subtle suggestions throughout the chapter. 3, nothing in the text offers distinction between clean and unclean animals. No food laws, no restrictions as seen thousands of years later in Mosaic law when God had to establish those parameters. Okay. 4th, the text itself actually states the opposite of what pro-sacrifice advocates suggest, that plants are the only form of food mentioned in Genesis chapter 1. And then finally, interpreting the text in favor of sacrifice and eating animals, it requires the reader to alter the text for their interpretation to fit the narrative by eliminating the word "to." So I could go on about the dairy. I won't. I'll save that for another video. This is a good passage. Psalm 104:14 says, He causeth the grass to grow for the cattle and the herb for the service of man, that he may bring forth food out of the earth. My goodness. And then another one from the Gospel of the Holy 12, it says, Is it not written that in the beginning God ordained the fruits of the trees and the seeds and the herbs to be food for all flesh? All flesh. Okay. I'm going to try to keep it under an hour. I got 5 more minutes, so I'm going to go over this really quick. This last section was just to use our common sense. People are afraid to do that. Okay. Using common sense, we can understand creation simply by observing the design itself. When the Creator made humans and animals both, He gave us digestive systems. Okay. Everything with blood flowing through its veins and the breath of life, it had the ability to eat. We are the eaters. Humans are eaters. And then animals, they are eaters because they eat. But plants were created to be eaten. It's as simple as that. Now, stay with me. It might be too simple for some people to even follow what I'm saying. It's basically, in this section, I talk about how it is disruptive to the order of design from a logical perspective. I mean, the fact that animals do not want to die and they have the instinct to defend themselves when humans attack, that should be enough to prove that they were never intended to be attacked or killed or eaten. Plants, they don't possess the same defense reflexes. Plants do not have a fear-based instinct to protect themselves when they are attacked. Okay? Why would God create humans and animals, both with the ability to eat certain items that were clearly designed for food, plants, but then instruct Adam to eat those animals? Does it make sense to think He designed eaters, humans who are eaters, to eat other eaters, animals? They are eaters. Does it make sense to think God designed eaters to eat eaters, or does it make the most sense to think that He designed all eaters to eat the plants that He clearly designed for food, and left that in Genesis chapter 1, verse 29 and 30? Clearly stated, plants. Adam, your food is the plants. Animals, your food is also the plants. Clearly stated, that simple. And when we use our logic, it all fits. What I'm saying all fits when we use our logic. It makes the most sense that the Creator made animals with the same eating ability as humans because He intended for us all to eat the same food. Eaters eat. Food is eaten. Eaters, animals, were not designed to eat each other. Humans were not designed to eat other eaters. Does that make sense? Eaters were not designed to eat other eaters. Eaters were not designed to be eaten at all. Eaters should not be classified as food any more than food should be classified as being an eater. So, it's as simple as I can make it. And in the most practical sense, in the most logical sense, it's most consistent to separate and categorize those different forms of creation based on those obvious similarities. And I even made a chart. This is how simple it is to understand. Get a good look at this chart. Self-awareness, a center of consciousness, sentience. Humans and animals both share this quality. Plants do not. Blood life. Humans and animals both share this quality. Plants do not. The breath of life. Guess what? Humans and animals both share this quality, and plants do not. And it is the same. We possess 5 senses. Plants do not. Organs, the bodily systems, a lot of these overlap with others. I understand that. Eater status, what I was just explaining. Plants are not eaters. And some people have even argued with me about that. So, well, what about the Venus flytrap? Well, it wasn't designed to eat. It absorbs whatever lands onto it. It does not have a digestive system. So, I mean, you can throw that argument out the window. Subject to physical suffering. Yes, humans and animals can suffer physically while plants cannot. Natural defense instincts. I'm more talking about like fear-based natural defense instincts. I know plants defend themselves. They don't have a fear-based defense mechanism. Emotions. Again, plants and animals, but not plant. I'm sorry, I jacked that all up. Humans and animals have emotions, and plants do not. Decision and free will. Humans and animals, yes. Plants, no. Communication with Yahweh. It doesn't even have to be with Yahweh. That can be just communication in general. Plants and animals communicate with one another and with God. In the beginning, it was, communication with God more so. And everyone speaking the Hebrew language. It's hard to imagine now because animals, they don't speak in English or Hebrew or anything anymore. So it's hard to imagine a scenario. And that could be another disconnect between humans and animals because we just can't picture it. We can't picture a world where the animals communicated with God or with humankind. Okay, commanded to be fruitful and multiply, not to kill and eat. So I hope you like that chart. I thought it is just good for people to get that visual. So it's really telling that God created certain living creatures with the breath of life and blood, and he created another form of life that doesn't possess those design characteristics. All right. Plants do not feel pain. They do not possess a center of consciousness. They were not designed with digestive systems. They were designed to be digested. Animals, on the other hand, were designed to consume, not to be consumed. And because of that logic, I would strongly encourage my readers, my viewers, to consider those obvious design limits that our Creator established. I thought this was really good. I know I'm going long now, but here's something really good. Right here it says plants. This is an excerpt that I added to the book. Plants are insentient creatures. Sentient means a creature that can feel pain or suffering and has consciousness. In order to be sentient, or sentient as some people pronounce it, a being needs to possess a brain and a central nervous system connected to different receptors: ocular receptors, sonar receptors, tactile receptors, gustatory receptors, olfactory receptors. I hope I pronounced that right. And only when you have receptors in the brain and a nervous system can you think, see, smell, feel, touch, hear, and taste. When you don't have these receptors, none of those things are possible. So to piggyback off what I was discussing earlier, no, because I skipped that part. when I was talking about how you receive nutrients from a third party when you eat animals. You can receive those nutrients directly if you just skip the middleman and go to the plant. I'm going to make a separate video for that, but that's a good topic because a lot of people think, oh, you need protein from animals. That is the biggest myth that people, they actually are duped into thinking that. And like I explained in one video on Facebook in the Shifting the Torah Paradigm, the Shifting the Torah Paradigm group that I made, it's a small private group. I don't want, it's not a debate group. So if you, it's not for everyone. I know a lot of people like to get in there into these different groups and just argue, go back and forth. That's not why I designed this group, why I created it. But one day I was talking about how I had this revelation that it's like, it makes sense that, we were given plants to eat because when you pick fruit, it has life in it. Okay, that fruit has life, and over time it doesn't die until much later. After a few weeks, it starts to decay. But for the time that you pick that, it has life, and when you eat that, you have life. Flesh, on the other hand, if you cut flesh away from an animal, it's dead. There's no life in it. This is just more logical observations. Only the plant life has life in it when you eat it, and it requires death to eat animals. Life with plant, death with animals. You can't eat animals without death, and I think that's huge. I wish I could remember everything I said in that video because it was really good. There were a few things that I was connecting the dots to. I can't remember now. That was the gist of it. But maybe I'll talk about it in the next video when I talk about how the nutrients, the proteins like calcium, everything we get comes from the ground. And that's why the plants were made. The plants are a conduit to give us those nutrients from the ground. And I'm just scrolling through now. Food is grown, not born. I love that statement. I can't remember where I heard it. But it says here, in conclusion, I'm concluding now that it was not by design that mankind began eating the animals. It was because we rebelled against the ordinances of the Father. And in Isaiah 24:5, it says, the earth also is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, they have changed the ordinances, and broken the everlasting covenant, which was established in the garden. The everlasting agreement. So the original Torah, that's what this is all about, is understanding Torah as it was given in creation, not Torah as it was given to Moses for the Israelites to correct them or to eliminate their behaviors. I'm talking about the original Torah given at creation. It didn't require as many. It was simple. It was simple Torah. And now, Torah is complicated because the more people there are, the more laws need to be established to govern them. And that's kind of the point, is that when Israel was brought out of Egypt, it required more laws to be added, okay? But you don't need those added laws if you're abiding by the original Torah. That's the point. And people will say, no. We need to have all these sacrificial laws, and we just need to live them out now because the law is everlasting. It's an eternal covenant, so we need to do all those laws. No, you don't, because those laws they're not for vegans. Sacrificial laws are not for vegans. Vegans have people who abide by the original Torah have put themselves in a higher moral standard and are abiding to that higher moral standard. Therefore, they don't need to even observe these lesser laws, these remedial laws. These laws that were meant to remedy their behavior, to correct them, vegans are already doing. We are already abiding by that original Torah by eating plants only, so we don't need those laws that were meant to correct us. Once you see it, it's beautiful. But if you're so bent on thinking that God demanded humanity to kill animals for his pleasure, he required blood, then you're going to remain there. You're going to remain in that state of, in that paradigm, in that world where God just required blood, that he loves the pleasing aroma of burnt flesh and death and destruction. If that's the God you want to serve, fine. I'm not even going to say that. I'm going to say, if that's your idea of God's morals, then fine. But I mean, I'm telling you, it is a higher moral standard to have mercy over sacrifice. That's what Jesus was trying to say. That's why he came. He was telling them that their man-made sacrificial laws were worthless. And that's why they crucified him. He interfered with the temple business. And that's why the religious leaders were so bent on executing him. It's an entire storyline that is present in the text. People miss it because of their lust for blood. That's it for today. Like I said, you can get this on Amazon. You don't have to get the hard copy, but I mean, it is nice. It's super nice. I mean, this is a quality book. I really liked the soft covers that I got a few weeks ago. Each time I get different books, you can tell they're made differently. They used a heavier paperweight for this. And when I say paperweight, I don't know if you guys know how printing works, but when you say the weight of a paper, they measure, that's the thickness of it. And they measure it per square inch or per square centimeter. And they use a weight. And if you have a centimeter and you put so much weight on it, and it's how much weight that paper can hold. So that's how thickness is determined. That's what I mean when I say paperweight. This one is a thicker paper. The soft covers are really nice because they're more floppy and they just feel more comfortable in your hand. And they're thinner. The people from Amazon who have bought the books, a couple of my friends have said, yeah, the Amazon copies are a lot thicker. They use a heavier paperweight. So I don't know. You might be able to see the difference. The one on this one is done by my publisher, and this one is done by Amazon. So that's the difference. But anyway, that's it. That's the lesson for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have friends who are interested in learning about that higher moral standard, that original Torah given at creation. If you know anybody who'd be interested, send them this video. I'm going to use this channel more often. Like, subscribe, do all that stuff. And I'll talk to you next week.